Good afternoon, good morning. I'm Nancy Kinder. I'm one of the co-hosts for London CMX. We have been running for nearly 2 years. We've had 22 events. This is our 23rd. And my co-hosts are Serena and Michelle. They do a grand job. And I'm going to step down as a co-host, but they're going to continue on. So please do keep in touch with them, follow them, and make sure you hear of all our next events. We have a channel within the CMX site where you can talk specifically with the folks there, and any past events that I've mentioned. Rob's is on there as well as Oliver's, and join us at future events. So what do we do? What do we try and do? Well, we're part of 60 odd chapters around the world that meet, used to be in person, but sadly in the last year has all been virtual. So you can, the great benefit from that is that you can join an event anytime, anywhere. And we're having our first EMEA conference in April. So do check out the CMX Hub and make sure you sign yourself up for that free event with some great top speakers. Our goals every time is that you meet one awesome person. And in a usual CMX London, we break out into small groups and we really have in-depth discussions about from what we've just heard from the speaker. Today we've got such a privilege. I invite you all to ask questions on the chat or through the Q&A, and I hope through that you'll still get to meet some great people. You're totally going to learn some actionable things that you can implement, and hopefully all of us will grow in the community industry. Do stop us at any time on the chat if you've got a question. But now I want to hand over to David. David started CMX in 2014 and has been growing exponentially every year. I've been privileged enough to go to his conference and his events for many years, and it gives me great pleasure to invite you to talk to CMX London. So over to you, David, to introduce all about your book, The Business of Belonging, and how to make build a community to be your competitive advantage. Thank you, David.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nancy and Serena, Michelle. Y'all are amazing. Some of our top CMX Connect leaders. We're very sad that you're leaving, Nancy. I don't know, maybe next CMX Summit at the after party, I can pitch you on sticking around the same way you pitched me on European conference, which is now happening, CMX Spark. And it's at least, I would say, 15% because of you all talking about it at CMX Summit at the after party. And now it's happening. So
Yay.
Thanks
for your support for that.
I wasn't totally drunk when I said that we would do it one day.
I didn't put a gun to his head, but
not literally. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm very excited to be here. The London family is always near and dear to me. My dad, I don't know if you knew this, my dad grew up in Bridlington. I don't know if you all know where Bridlington is, because I always say that to people who live in England and they're like, where the hell is that? Do you all know where that is? No? No one knows? It's like a little like coastal town. All right, Nick knows where it is. My dad's also a Leeds fan, and my family still lives in Bridlington, and my aunt's in Bath, and so we have family all over England. So I'm over there pretty often. Maybe next CMX Connect we can do it in person. That would be pretty cool. Okay, cool. Well, this is going to be exciting because this is the first time I'm giving this talk ever, and I'm probably going to give this talk 100 times in the next 6 months. It's kind of like the talk I'm giving around the book, and so y'all are the privileged first viewers of it / guinea pigs. So we'll see how this goes. I'm very excited to share this with you and get all your feedback and answer your questions. There's a lot in here, so let's kick off and see if I could keep us even close to within time. So again, yeah, I'm David Spinks, co-founded CMX in 2014 to build a community for community professionals. And I think just to kick things off, just to kind of paint the picture of where we're at today, where we are as an industry today is extremely different from where we were when we started CMX in 2014. And so just to share a couple stats, recently, First Round Capital published their State of Startups reports, and they found that 80% of startups are investing in community and 28% consider it to be their moat and critical to their success. Which when I saw this stat, it was like surreal, because I remember when I started in this space, it was like pulling teeth to get companies to really understand and care and invest in community. And now it seems like every company is investing in community. In our own study that we did with CMX, 86% of companies found that community is critical or crucial to their company's mission. And now we're seeing articles almost like every day, it seems like, talking about community-led businesses, how the chief community officer is the new CMO. It's taken over the world of tech. It's really become this thing that that people are believing in and investing in, and communities becoming a big part of the business world. And so, since that time, things have evolved a lot, and I truly do believe that the era of community-powered business has arrived. It's something that we've been talking about for over a decade, and I've always said I believe the future of business is going to be community, and it really feels like that's coming true. And so now the question is, okay, every business is bought into community or interested in it at the very least. How do we help them do that really successfully? How do we help them build community in an authentic way that's actually going to be measurable and valuable to their business? Before I dive into the actual nitty gritty of everything, I wanted to share a little bit about my backstory. So this is me as a baby. My parents, like I said, my dad grew up in Bridlington. He was actually born in Ireland, in Dublin. My mom was born in Rishon LeZion in Israel. My dad moved to Israel. They met there, and then they moved to the US, and I was born a year later. And so I grew up in Long Beach, New York, and Long Island. It's a small beach town that's literally surrounded by water. So kind of like New York energy, but with like an island vibe. It's a very unique and weird place, and somewhat insular, because it's literally an island. Everyone knows everyone. And when you move to a new place, both my parents had just moved to the country when I was born. We didn't have a social network. My uncle was the only family we had there. We didn't have a lot of family. We didn't have friends. We didn't have a social network. And so my parents had to like figure out how to meet people and build a social network from the ground up. But we were different, right? Like, we came from a different place. We came from a different culture. My household was very different than the friends that I grew up with's household. And so from a very early age, I had to learn a lot about belonging, about how to find community, and I struggled in a lot of ways, right? I became, the token Jew in some circles, and dealt with anti-Semitism in those early days, and had lots of struggles to find my sense of community. So, like any kid in the 90s, what did I do? I turned to video games. And so Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 was my game of choice. Anyone here a Tony Hawk fan? Maybe. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fan? Maybe not. I don't know. Okay. Rob's. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. I'm not the only one. So I got obsessed with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. I was about 12 when I started playing. I was playing hours and hours every day, and I actually became one of the top players in the world. And we ended up starting a clan, like a gamer clan. And the clan became one of the top clans in the game. And we launched a website with a forum and a community. We were running contests. We were doing giveaways. At one point, I won a contest, and I got to meet Tony Hawk, and I got to have him sign something. And there was an inside joke in our community about pudding packs. I couldn't even tell you what the joke was, but it had to do with pudding packs. And so I had Tony Hawk sign a perishable good pudding pack, and he was extremely confused, but he did it. And then we gave it away in the community as a gift, and everyone was blown away. And so at 13, we were running one of the largest Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 communities online. My clan co-founder happened to be a developer. He built the forum. we're moderating, managing trolls, just everything that we all do today. I was doing at a really young age, and that kind of turned me on to the power of community and online communities, and that became kind of a theme in my life and an obsession. I was an early adopter of like every social tool. I went to college for business and helped launch our first social media and community course there back when they were still just teaching traditional marketing. And eventually, one of my biggest breaks in my career was one of my first jobs was as a director of community for a company called Zarly. And so this is me working at Zarly. You can see a giant pyramid of rubber ducky swag that we would give away to our community members. Zarly was a really interesting company. We launched out of a startup weekend. So I don't know if you know about startup weekend, but in a weekend you come up with an idea and you build it, and it launched out of there. And within a couple months, we had raised money from Ashton Kutcher, Groupon, Sands Capital, Kleiner Perkins, Meg Whitman, like some of the top investors and like celebrity investors in the world. We're on every tech press you can ask for. We were like the hot thing, and they brought me in to be the director of community. And I was like very young, very ambitious. And so I came in and I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I just started like building and organizing events and launching communities online and event programs. And we did, within 6 months, we had a power user programs going in 15 different cities that were each launching regular events. We were hosting big events. We were doing it was a marketplace, the concept. So it was all like buyers and sellers, kind of like Etsy or eBay or things like that. And we built a pretty thriving community around it. People were very engaged and very excited. But 10 months after I took that job, I got fired. And so, that was, there was a lot of reasons for me getting fired. A lot of them were out of my control. And turned out there were, a number of issues, and the company didn't end up succeeding. But it was like one of the lowest points in my career. It took me a while to build up my confidence after that. And when I reflect back on it now, though, I'm really grateful for it, because I think it's the experience I learned the most from. And it's kind of what sparked a lot of what we ended up building with CMX, and the work that I do every day today is to make sure that others don't have to go through the experience I went through. And the problem there was that we are building this really incredible community, but for what? I didn't have a clear strategy in place. There wasn't a clear way to report on progress. I couldn't tell you exactly how it was impacting the business. It was just community for the sake of community. And when that happens, you just end up taking on more and more and more and more. And you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You don't know how to prioritize it. And that's why I just got completely overwhelmed. I had way more on my plate than I could ever do. I was managing a full team. This was, within a year of graduating from college. I was managing, I think, 6 people, and just got completely overwhelmed, burnt out, and crash and burned. And I'm not the only one who deals with this situation. Professionals probably have found themselves in this situation. And in fact, our research showed that only 12%, feel confident in their ability to quantify the business value of their community. So this is a staggering stat that came from our research that just points out that we have a lot to learn still as an industry, even though there's a lot of interest and passion. There's still a long way to go to make sure that community is really a core, valuable, measurable part of a business. And so that ultimately led us to start CMX. This is a shot from the very first CMX, 2014 in San Francisco. I had this weird pay us haircut going on. I don't know what I was thinking. But we just wanted to host an event to bring all the people who are doing this work together so that we can learn from each other, learn from these mistakes, start talking about what does this mean in the world of business. And it was a huge hit. I mean, we had 300 people come out. We put this whole event together in about 6 weeks. 300 people came out, flew from all over the country, all over the world. And it was the first event they had ever been to where they could look around and every other single person in the room was also building community. So it's this really powerful, one of those community experiences where it's finally someone built something just for me, right? That's our goal as community builders, is like make people feel like we are building something for them, specifically for them. And so it worked. We started hosting more events. This is our event in Williamsburg in New York, and it grew and it grew and it continued to grow. This was in 2018 down in LA. It continued to grow. This is our last in-person event in 2020 in Mountain View. We had over 1,000 people come to this event. And our last event was virtual. We had 5,000 people register for it. So you can just kind of see the trajectory of CMX kind of aligns with the growth of the community industry, and just how many people are now doing this work and investing in this work. That ultimately led to the acquisition. So in 2019, Bevy, a company that powers all kind of community event programs, that's the tool we're using right here today, powers all of CMX's events, acquired CMX. And so we teamed up to continue to work to advance the community industry and build the tools that community teams need to solve these problems. And that leads to today. So this week, actually, we just published the book, The Business of Belonging, which is kind of a complete collection of everything we've learned over 7 years of CMX and built, and everything I've learned over my career of about 13 years now, and how to build community. And so I'm going to give you like a crash course in community strategy and kind of give you the like very brief overview of kind of the key elements in the book now. Cool. Y'all with me? All right, let's dive in. So before we get into the actual community strategy, I want to talk very high level about what it means for a business to invest in building community, because I think language is really important, and our ability to explain how community fits into a business is the first step to helping others understand and to getting buy-in and to successfully building community. And the first distinction that I think is important to make is to understand the difference between community as a cultural value versus community as a business operation. Because we use the term community for so many things and it means so many different things, and it's important to articulate which one of these we're talking about. And we all know what community is as a cultural value. We've experienced it in our life. It's a sense of belonging, shared identity, connection, shared purpose, shared investment. It's a feeling like you're a part of something, right? A connection to other people. And that is the foundation of the work that we do. Without this, none of the community operations will work. You have to have this, and this is where we always start. And this is why most of us do this work, is because we love bringing people together. But to be successful in business, we have to take it from just a cultural value into a strategy and an operation that we can scale and tie back to business value. And a very simple way to kind of think about community operations or how community drives growth is to think about it in terms of building an audience. So to build an audience, what do? You help people. You create content, you create value, you give them something, and so they start following you. To build a community, you help people help each other. So instead of you doing everything and creating all the value, you are creating a space for people to be able to create value for each other, right? So you can think about every part of business. Customer support is essentially helping customers with their questions. They email you or call you, and your customer support agents help them. Community-driven support will be customers helping each other, answering questions for each other, supporting each other. Marketing is creating content and experiences for people to build up that audience and awareness. Community-driven marketing is members creating content and experiences for each other, right? So you're empowering your members, like CMX Connect, to self-organize events and programs for each other. You know, business itself is essentially just creating value for people, whether it's a service or a product or a good. A business creates value for each other. A community-driven business is all about people creating value. They create a platform for people to create value for each other. And it's a fundamental shift in business philosophy, right? Because traditional businesses since the Industrial Revolution has always said that, like, we build the product, you consume it. And a community-driven business says, we are creating a space, but we're all co-creating this thing and helping each other. It's more of a platform approach. And so you can think about community as an accelerant for what your business is already doing. It's not like it's its own department, but it's almost like a center of excellence that you can apply to every different part of the business to accelerate it and enhance it and improve it and make it more meaningful. A really great example of a community-driven business is Duolingo. So Duolingo today is over 300 million active users, and they have 80 courses that you can learn all these different languages. And almost all of their courses are created by the community. So they create a incubator where their community members put in the content that makes up the language learning courses. And as a result, they're able to build 80 courses in a really short amount of time. If you compare them to like Rosetta Stone, that's been around for like 5 times as long, they still don't have more than 30 courses. So you can see the contrast in how scalable it is when you lead with a community. And then on the events side, they wanted to start hosting events so people can practice their languages with each other. But instead of them hosting it, they empower the community to host it. And with a team of 3 people, at their peak, they were running 2,600 events per month in person before COVID. So again, massive, massive scale that's unlocked by taking a community approach to something in business. Salesforce is another great example on the B2B side. So you have their forums. 84% of the questions that come to their forum, to their support network, is answered by other customers, by their peers. They have over 1,000 of these local chapters and groups that are all helping each other learn and grow through the Trailblazer program. And then even Dreamforce, which everyone in San Francisco knows because it just completely takes over the whole city. 170,000 plus attendees. And most of that whole, they create like some of the core experiences, but everything else is created by the community. All the events and experiences are built around it. And so you can kind of think as like the traditional business is this like group of people building something for customers. But now you're only limited by those people. Like you can only create what those people are able to create in the time and resources that they have. A community powered business taps into the collective network and the collective power of customers, of investors, of ambassadors, of fans, of power users, of all these people who want to contribute in different ways. And you're activating those people. And as a result, you can radically expand your company and your impact. And what you end up having is this compounding effect where, you know, if you want to host more events in a traditional business, you hire more event organizers. But if you want to, if you take a community approach, you can start with 1 chapter that turns into 2 chapters to 4 to 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. You get this kind of exponential curve of growth that comes from activating a community. All right. Last thing I'll say is on the value of community is that one of the most powerful things is it's the one thing they can't copy. So anyone today can copy your code, they can copy your marketing, your design, they can copy your messaging. In the no code movement today, it's easier than ever to build a product. It's no longer a huge competitive advantage to just have a tool. And community is becoming this like one thing that they really can't copy because it's built up of these interpersonal relationships that take a long time to build up and a lot of trust. And someone can literally copy everything in your community, the way it looks, the way it works, the way it functions, but it's impossible for them to copy the sense of belonging, the connections, the relationships in that community. And so coming back to this stat, if this is so valuable, if we're able to grow exponentially and community has such a huge impact for businesses, then why are community teams still struggling so much to quantify their value? Well, the number one reason that communities fail isn't because of lack of engagement. It's not because they couldn't get people engaged and activated. It's actually because of lack of resources, right? This is, again, from our research. And so if you're not able to prove the value of your work and really tie it back to a clear strategy, you're not going to be able to get buy-in and investment and resources to build your community. And as a result, it's going to die. Right. So when we talk about like, should we mix business and community? It's like, yes, we have to. We have to make sure that the communities we're building are financially sustainable. And that's true whether you're a huge enterprise company or just someone casually building community. You still need to justify that time and investment and make it sustainable, or you're going to burn out. So what do? We need a community strategy. That's how we will start to make it really clear where community fits into our business and how we can drive that real value. And so we have the 3 levels of community strategy that you can use to kind of start to create and craft your community programs. So it breaks down into 3 levels. At level 1, we have the business value, so the business outcomes that we're trying to drive. On the second level, we have the community programs that we're going to run. And then we have the tactical level. What are we actually doing day to day in order to drive that community and achieve that business outcome? Right. So really simple. What's our business goal? What programs are we going to run to do that? And what are the tactics we're going to use to make those programs successful? Let's start with that business level. How do you measure the quantifiable business value of community? For that, we have the Spaces model. Welcome, Space Cat. Space Cat is our tour guide through all the different business outcomes that community can drive for your business. All right. So Spaces stands for support, products, acquisition, contribution, engagement, and success. Right, the 6 areas that community can drive value for the business. All right, let's go through each one. So support, again, is just, you can think about any support form. It's where your customers are solving problems for each other, answering questions for each other. Pretty standard. Everyone's pretty familiar with support forums. We have programs like Atlassian with over 3 million members. They measure customer satisfaction as a result of engaging people through this program. And they also measure the increased likelihood that someone chooses to buy a product after participating in their community. Fitbit, another really good example on the consumer side. They actually see an annual savings of about $40 million just through this program. And one thing that they use that's really effective in this program is a community council. That council ends up answering 40% of all the questions. So a very small group is able to solve a lot of problems for a lot of customers. Next, we have product. So product is where you're building a community in order to collect feedback and insights that help you make your product better. So Fitbit is a really good example of this, again, in their feature suggestions. So sometimes this takes the form of a really large network where people can share ideas, vote on those ideas, comment on it. So you kind of get this crowdsourced way of seeing what's really important to your customers. And it can also take the form of a much smaller council, like the Lyft Advisory Council, which started with just 10 members for a long time. Now it's got about 200 that are representative of the community, and they bring that council in to test new product features, weigh in on programs and policies and big decisions that the company is making. So it brings the voice of the customer or the user into business decisions and product decisions. Third, we have acquisition. So acquisitions where you're building community in order to drive growth, increase your pipeline, increase awareness, and so on. Great example of this is Branch with their mobile growth community. So Branch does mobile analytics, and they created this event program called Mobile Growth, where it's just hosting events that are educational for prospective customers. And they've measured $5 million in annual recurring revenue as a result of this program. And they see a 10x ROI from what they invest into what they're actually getting out of this program. On the consumer side, or just online, is the Skim. So the largest newsletter in the world, over 7 million subscribers. I think it's higher now, actually. And 18% of their subscribers come from their Skimbassador program, where they create these advocates and they reward them for helping drive new people to the email newsletter. All right. Next up, we have next up we have contribution. So contribution is where you have your business is a platform type of business. So anywhere where you're creating a platform that you need people to be contributing products or content or something to it to be successful. And so you want to make those contributors successful. So Airbnb is a prime example. 890,000 super hosts, not hosts, super hosts, that they gather through their super user program in online experiences and offline before and after COVID. And their goal is, of course, to make hosts more successful and more engaged on the Airbnb platform, so that there's more postings and more availability for people who are booking. or anything that's developer relations focused is going to be this contributor kind of program. Google Developer Groups is a really great example. They have tons of developers who build on the Android platform and different Google developer programs. They have over 1,000 local chapters that are all event programs that's run by the community, self-organized, and their goal is to engage and educate those developers to make them more successful at contributing to the platform. All right, next up we have engagement. So engagement is essentially like customer retention, right? You want to just engage people through community programs and as a result drive increased loyalty and lifetime value and hopefully they use your product more. So Duolingo, that event program is a really great example. You can only learn so much in that app and then you want to practice language with other people. So they built a community program to keep people engaged and give them that opportunity to learn from each other through those events. Sephora is a really great example of this as well. So they have their Beauty Insider community. Anyone can participate in this community. You don't have to be their customer. It's just about beauty in general. And they found that the people who participate on this forum spend 2 times more than their average customer, and their power users on this forum spend 10 times more. So great example of engaging people through just their common interests, and as a result, or at least correlated, is increased spend and investment in their products. And then finally, we have success. So success is where you want to make your customers more successful at using your product or more successful in their career. Really great examples of this is the Salesforce Trailblazer community that we referenced earlier. They did a survey of their community and found that 82% of their customers say that this program increased the ROI of their investment in Salesforce. So really, really great example of like educating your customers and giving them a lot of value. They ended up getting more value out of the tool because of the community. Notion's a really great example of this as well. Notion's a very fast-growing company where you can create different docs and tools and templates, but it's kind of like you could use it for whatever you want, which can be a little overwhelming for people. And so they built this community and their Notion Pros community where their users can kind of share, show and tell their templates and their tools and the things that they built on there to help them all learn from each other. All right, so that's the spaces model. Those are the 6 areas or 6 business goals that community can drive. And so you can really think about which ones of these you want to really focus on with your community. Thank you, Space Cat, for your guidance. You are relieved of your duties. And my one piece of advice on the spaces model is to get really focused. Go ahead and type in the chat if you are working on a community today, how many of the 6 areas of the spaces model are you focusing on today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? Type in the chat. 6, yeah. 3, okay. 3, 4. Okay, all right, 4. So yeah, lots would love more expansion on 6. I don't know. Okay. 4 and 3. Okay. So a lot of you are around like the 3-4 range. Some of you are doing all 6. And that's pretty consistent with what I see across community teams. Like it's almost never one. I've never heard anyone say we're just focusing on one of these things. But that would be my advice. I mean, if you already have an established company and an established community program and a well-resourced team where you can staff each of these different areas really efficiently and put the right tools and systems and resources in place, great. You should do more than one. But if you are still trying to like really get buy-in and show how community is driving value for your business, it's really important to be focused so that you can speak to the exact value that you're driving for your company and you can align it with what's most important to the company, right? Because remember, community is an accelerant for what your business is already doing. And if you start taking on customer support, success, product, marketing, you're literally working on 4 teams. And that's going to make it really hard for you to be successful. I would find 1, maybe 2 teams that, you know, you believe you can measure, you can have a huge impact on, you know what to do, and start there and make that work really, really, really well because that's what's going to help you get buy-in for you to say, great, now I want to start investing in product. Let's say I need to hire 2 more people for an community operations role and a community engagement role, and I need this budget for a platform that's going to help us do product right, because the tool we're using for marketing isn't going to help us get product feedback in the right way from the community. That's going to help you grow it. And that's exactly what people like Erica Cool did at Salesforce. She started razor focus on marketing and then grew it out from there. And now they're doing all 6, extraordinarily, but it started with just 1. All right, flying through. Definitely not going to be under time. Sorry, Nancy, I lied to you. But we're going to get through this. Okay, community level. So now how do you build and engage your community? All right. So for this, we use the social identity cycle. It's a framework I developed with the CMX team to help you understand exactly how someone becomes a member of a community over time. And you could think of every experience you've ever had in a community, any community you have ever joined, and you probably went through this cycle. First, you identify with a group. It could just be loosely, like say I'm a salesperson and there's the sales hacker community, for example. I talk all about the sales hacker community in the book. I'm like, great, I'm a salesperson. Sales hacker is like an interesting brand and voice that resonates with me. I identify with it. Okay, I'm going to participate, and I'm going to start in small ways. I'm going to maybe, just join. Maybe I fill out my profile. Maybe I introduce myself. Hopefully in that first experience, I have a positive experience and I feel validated. Somebody welcomed me to the community. I learned something from reading some of the posts, and I got value. And so what that does is that reinforces the identity. So now, because I got value, now I feel more strongly like I identify with the sales hacker community. And now I want to participate in greater ways. So maybe next time I post in the community or comment in it, maybe I attend an event, or eventually, you keep going through this cycle and I host an event, or I become an ambassador or a leader. And as we just keep going through it, every time, if people feel validated through those participations, through that participation, their identity will deepen. They'll participate in greater ways. They'll feel more and more validated, and so on. The important thing to think about with identity is that there are many different levels of identity, right? So communities are never homogeneous. It's never just like everybody is experiencing community in the same way. That's why it's always kind of bullshit when someone looks at a group and they're like, that's not a community, that's an audience. And my response is always like, well, is there a community within that audience? Like, how specific are you getting within that group? Right? So like, take Airbnb as an example. If you're a guest on Airbnb, do you feel a strong sense of community? Maybe you just needed a place to stay, right? It's probably not the deepest sense of community. So even though it's the Airbnb community, I'm still like part of that ecosystem. I may not feel a very deep sense of community. What if I'm a host? Okay, maybe a little bit more, right? I'm getting some income from it, but maybe it's still just transactional to me. I don't really feel engaged in the host community. What if I'm a super host? All right, now it's starting to feel like a real community, because I'm using this thing so much. It's such a core part of my life. I want to learn. I want to grow. I'm invested in it. So yeah, I'm starting to feel like a real deep sense of community. Or all the way to employees, right? So obviously, if you're an employee at Airbnb, you're probably going to feel a pretty strong sense of identity and connection as part of the Airbnb community. So all communities kind of have these different levels and layers of identity and belonging. And generally, as you move towards that center, it's going to be a deeper sense of connection. And one tool you can use for your own community, if you're thinking about can you get more specific, is to do a kind of tree diagram and just write maybe at the top, it's just like your customers, and then break it down. Like, what are the different kinds of customers you have? Your most active customers, maybe they're in different industries, maybe they have different needs, or they're in different stages of their company. And then you can break those down farther. And that will help you really start to identify where there's the biggest opportunity for you to build community, where there's the biggest opportunity because people feel a need for it, right? I'm going to skip through this because I'm sure we get through it. So participation. A very useful thing you can use for the participation design is something called the community commitment curve. So remember, again, if I'm just joining a community, I'm only going to want to start to engage in small ways, right? Just like fill out my profile, introduce myself. And the idea with the commitment curve is over time, their level of commitment will go up. And so their willingness to participate in greater and greater ways will go up with that. And so I learned about this for the first time from Douglas Atkin, who he built this exact curve for Meetup, and then went on to be the global head of community at Airbnb. And he built this because he realized, they were basically like asking for too much too early. They're like, "Welcome to Meetup, host your first event," and it's like people were just like, "Whoa, it's a little forward, you gotta take it slow." And so he built out this kind of journey that people can go through in order to think about what are the small asks you can make of your community members in the early days, and then how will that grow over time. All right. And then finally, we have validation. I told you, this is the crash course. There's a lot more stuff in each of these. Each one of these is an entire chapter in the book. So you're getting just the highlights. For validation, one of my favorite frameworks is the SNAP framework from Holly Firestone and Venify. So you can think about 4 ways that you can reward your members. One is status. So think about badges, increase roles within the community, points and systems that help them improve their status within their community, certificates, things like that. 2 is networking. So giving them, inviting them to exclusive networking events, or bringing them into groups where they get to meet people in a really high quality curated way. That's always really valuable. Access. So access to your team is a really great example, like giving them access to your product team and letting them in. It's kind of like influence. It's influencing your product roadmap, influencing your team and direction. Can you do a meet and greet with your CEO? What are the things that you can do to make them feel like they're getting access for their contributions? And then finally, we have perks. So swag, everyone's favorite, like swag, gifts, discounts, gym memberships. We love to give calm.com memberships to CMX members because everyone needs a little calm right now. And so just thinking about like, what are the gifts or things that you can reward people with? So Snap, status, networking, access, and perks from Holly Firestone. Give her a shout out on Twitter. She's awesome. All right. And finally, we have the tactical level. Again, tons more we could talk about in community tactics, but I want to leave you with just 5 key things that I think are really important for building community. 1, do things that don't scale. There's no big community in the world today that didn't start really small and hands-on. I just spoke with Sarah Leary, who's the co-founder of Nextdoor, and she told me this story of how and Nextdoor is in like 90% of cities in the US or neighborhoods in the US right now, which is wild. They started with one neighborhood and they literally went to like the housing board and pitched Nextdoor, like their concept to them, and then they went door to door knocking on people's doors asking them to join the platform. So like super not scalable, super hands-on, but that's how you really create a special and intimate experience in the early days. 2, stay consistent. Show up on the same time every day, show up on the same time every week with your like rituals. If you're hosting events, do it on like the first Tuesday of every month or something, and just keep showing up over and over and over again. Even if nobody shows up for the first few, just continuing to show up will continue to build that routine and that habit for your community members. And if you do it at the same time, then they know there's going to be an event on the first Tuesday of every month. They don't have to like look up when the next event is. They always know there's going to be an event, and that makes it a lot easier. It removes a barrier from them participating. 3, don't fear the crickets. So I think our biggest fear often as community builders is we're going to host an event and no one's going to show up, right? No one's going to come to our birthday party, or we're going to post something in our community and no one's going to respond. You have to get over that fear. You know, if it's an event and only a few people show up, great, like make it into a more intimate experience. If you post in a community and no one responds, great, that probably means no one saw it because the algorithm just didn't choose to show it to them. Just keep putting yourself out there, and don't let that fear of not having a response stop you. 4 is to invest in DEI from day one. Too often people launch communities and then they add DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion later. And the challenge with that is you are now creating a new standard that is going to be hard to change later, right? Because community and DEI are inseparable. Because when you create a social space, you are the one choosing who belongs and who doesn't, who's welcome and who isn't, and who's safe and who's not. And we know today that in general society, it's not an equitable society. And so if you don't intentionally invest in it, you're perpetuating those norms, you're perpetuating that status quo, and you miss an opportunity to change it. And then let's say you build a community and everyone in there is white. It's going to be much harder to now make people of color feel like they're welcome in that community when they don't see people like them. And you can solve for that by starting from day one. If you're inviting your first 10 people to the community, make sure it's diverse and representative, because now you're setting a great foundation for the future of your community. And finally, default to transparency. One of my favorite rules. Community is all about trust, and there's no better way to build trust with people than just being completely open, being vulnerable, sharing what you're learning, share what you don't know. Like, one of my favorite things to do in the CMX community is being like, I have no idea what we're doing with this thing, but we're going to try it. You know, we do really appreciate your help and feedback and making it really great. If we make a mistake, you know, being transparent about like our blind spots and where we made that mistake and owning it. So when in doubt, always default to transparency. And that's all I got. So I hope you enjoy the talk. Hope you all love the book. It's out everywhere now. I think we're going to do a giveaway to people who participated of a couple books, but thank you so much. Let's do some questions.
Thank you, David. That was awesome. We've had a flurry of messages and questions, and I hope people have voted on their favorite one. I'm not sure if Rob's at the top of the list, so I'm going to go with that one first on the Q&A. What would you say to the team at the New York Times who have just got rid of their 77 strong Facebook cooking community because they couldn't resource it properly? Do you have an opinion on that one?
I mean, it's such a great example, right, of like hire professionals to do this work. Don't just like leave it up to, you know, someone as part of their job. Don't hire interns to run a massive community. Like, what a missed opportunity. Like I kind of want to like spend a month and just go in there and see if I can fix it, because it's like such a fun challenge. Like, yeah, I mean, if they want to turn it around now, it would start with like a lot of listening, a lot of talking to members, and a lot of rebuilding trust and refilling up that cup of trust, because I think they lost a ton of trust there. Properly staffing it with experienced community professionals, really understanding and articulating what their business objectives are, so that they can design it in a way intentionally that they're able to track back to those business objectives. And they, I mean, that's a great example. They have like a highly engaged, highly active community, and yet like they're like, oh, let's just give it away. So great example of why, you know, maybe they should just read the book.
And that's what I made a comment on, is that actually probably everyone in this virtual room today gets everything that you've said today and has been reinforced by the key messages. The people that we're missing this communication is the leaders making those decisions. And like, how do we get a great spokesperson like yourself in front of those decision makers? And that's what I think we'd like. I said, buy your boss a book to sort of help have those conversations. So one of the questions.
Well, honestly, that's a big reason why I wrote the book, is like, there's only so many people. Like, I can reach the community professionals very easily today. Like we've been doing this for a long time. I've been talking to y'all nonstop for like 10 years. But a book for whatever reason, because it's like this physical paper thing with like a publisher's name on it, like the chance of a CMO reading it is much higher than them coming to my talk on community or joining CMX. And so I do think it's actually a really powerful tool that I hope will help a lot of businesses.
We used to say we needed to put it in an in-flight magazine, although no one's flying at the moment, but we used to think that that's when the CEOs and people have downtime to read what's going on, and then they'll come back and go, I want a community. So yeah, we need to.
Now it's just got to be on Netflix.
Yeah. And that leads to the question, how do we communicate and influence leaders and teams? Have you got any further words apart from buying the book to influence them?
Yeah. I mean, a general rule with influence is like it's very hard to like change people's minds. So if you have someone in your company that's like, I don't give a shit about community, or like this is just not worth my time, it's probably going to be a very hard uphill battle to change their mind. But what you can do is, if there are people in your company who do believe in it but just don't really get it yet, spending time with those people and finding those advocates within the company is really critical. So like find the advocates, find the believers, and get them on board and be able to make specific asks over time of them. So much of this is just also like conversations. I mean, like I have a standing one-on-one with our head of customer success, with our VP of sales, with our CMO, with our CEO. So every department leader, I have a standing one-on-one with them either every week, every other week, or once a month, depending on like how much we're focusing on that right now. And just like getting in the room with those people and having these conversations and being able to ask them, like I don't go to them and I'm like, help us build community. I go to them and say, like, what are the challenges you're working on right now? What are the things that you're really trying to achieve? Do you have any ideas for how community can help you? I have some ideas for how community can help you. I'd love to like put together a plan and like do that work for them. And that's how you get that buy-in, is like you have to get in the room and you have to understand what their goals are and align what you're doing with what they need.
Yeah, definitely connect to their biggest challenge, so it becomes an easy thing to support. I think one thing I learned was, don't assume in leadership changes that they're gonna hear it from their peers and continually support that, because
so yeah, actually I'm really glad you brought that up. That's like a huge lesson I've only like, I just keep relearning, is nobody has any idea what you're doing unless you tell them. In the world of business, everybody is 99.9% focused on what they have to do. They have no idea what you're doing unless you make it really clear for them. Like one thing we started doing, the community team, is just sending out a monthly community team update, which I may even move to weekly in the future. But for now, it's like every month, the whole team, everyone in the company gets an update with our content, our education, our events, our community programs. Here are the metrics. Here's our growth. Here are the key campaigns we're working on. Here are core asks of the rest of the team. And just like overwhelm everyone with like information and just make it really clear, this is what the community team's working on. This is what we're doing. This is the impact we're having. And I'm just constantly communicating that outwardly and reminding them, because if you're not consistently communicating it outward, no one has any idea what you're doing, and they're just going to assume like you're not doing much, because they probably aren't seeing, they're not participating in the community, they're not seeing the events, they're nowhere near as close to it as you are.
And that's the thing. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, I think that challenge with today's kind of state of the world is we're not offline anymore, we're online, so it's harder for them to see. So yeah, being really proactive about sharing what you're up to is, I think, key.
That's what I was going to say, but I think as community managers, we look at the community members first, and we're constantly serving them and forgetting maybe to look at that internal network stakeholder group that we need to support. And as I say, even with those reports, David, you have a change in leadership, and unless you've sat down, they don't even read the report. So you've got to keep, it's like the flag, waving the flag for community never ends. Never.
Exactly.
Thank you for those.
Treat it like you're building community internally, right? How do you get people bought in? How do you get them excited? How do you get them feeling like they're invested and involved in it? You are serving members, you're also serving the company. You have to be able to wear both of those hats and be that translator both ways, community to the company, company to the community.
Which leads us nicely on. Thank you all for the questions, by the way. Annette asked, how do we persuade the members to commit time when business as usual or other things sort of take away the priority? And I think, Annette, knowing you, that's an internal community that you're describing, but I might have made an assumption there. But how do we make the value for them to give up their resources and time to support the community?
Well, if you're, I mean, I would reframe that into like, what can you do to bring them value? Like, instead of getting them to participate, think about what are their goals? What do they want to accomplish? What's exciting to them? I've done a lot of work with like the G2G program, which is Google to Google, Googler to Googler, and I write about them in the book as well. And so that's all about internal education. They run all these programs that help employees teach each other different skills. They do fitness classes, coding classes. But they have to ask employees to teach it to other employees. And the reality is, like, not everyone's going to be as invested. Not everyone's going to be organically motivated. It's the same exact thing as I said before. You're probably not going to be able to convince people who aren't organically motivated. So I would start with the people who are organically motivated, focus on making them as successful as possible, because as we know, like 1% of a community will create, 80% of the content. So make sure that like core 1% are really successful and really engaged and create a really great flywheel, like a center of gravity. Then other people will start to want to be involved in it because they see kind of like others being really successful. They see that engagement. But until they see that, they're not going to be like the early adopter of your community.
Which kind of answers, Paul, your question about how do you make it sexy enough. I'm going to do the last one with Michael, because then we need to wrap up and tell you about next month's event. But this has been incredible. I think everyone would agree how valuable this hour has been. Thank you for sharing all this with us. So Michael's question is, should community be in everyone's job, in their role in the organization, or just a few? What's your opinion?
Great question. I think community is the job of everyone in the company, because a business is a community. It's a group of people working together to solve problems for other people. So your employees are part of a community. Your customers are part of a community. Your support team is solving problems for the community. Your product team is building tools, and your engineering team is building tools for the community. Your marketing team is growing the community. The community team's job is to facilitate those operations that we discussed, facilitate the programs, whether it's online forums or event programs. Your job is to create the system of interconnected relationships and activate that community to take action. That's the community team's job. And that's exactly going back to that original point of the difference between community as a cultural value and community as a business operation. It's everyone's job on a cultural level. It's the community's job on an operational level.
Yay. Thank you, David, so much for preparing and sharing it with us first. We feel very privileged to have that exclusive. We have been very proud of the community that we've grown and will continue to grow, because there's so many passionate community managers in and around UK and Europe. So thank you all for your questions. Serena, over to you to tell everyone about the CMX London Next event. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave. Following you is really tricky, but I'll give it a whirl. I'm so pleased that we've had David here today sharing some fantastic insights, and we'll be able to share more links to the book. Buy your boss a book. But yeah, just to talk through our next event. So we are going to be meeting again on Thursday, the 29th of April, 1 till 2 p.m. BST, because we'll have changed clocks by then. And we're actually going to have Richard Millington, the founder of Feverby join us. And he's going to be talking to us about taking your community to the next level. And this is going to be a really deep dive around engagement and how you might be looking at your engagement, improving your engagement, and making sure you're delivering value for your community. So please do join us. I've put the link in the chat, but we will also be sending that in our follow-up. You can always find us at events.cmxhub.com/London. So yeah, hope to see you then. Great. I think that's, have we got the link to the book's gone in the chat as well. I can see that too.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being so engaged and showing up and hanging out today.
Lovely.
I can't hear you, Nancy. You're muted.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Fine.